Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Voices of Humanity show at prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. My name is Guy Dawson, and I have been participating in a series of interviews with victims of police brutality and police misconduct. And we have Cristina Paulos. She is a woman who received third-degree burns while in custody with the Metro Police Department, and also Nisa Sun. She is with Force Trajectory Project. She's a regular on the show. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And Cristina, we talked quite a bit about your case last week, the details about what happened to you. And we had decided that we wanted to come back this week to discuss the case from not so much what happened to you, but the legal aspects of it. And so we're going to be discussing the legal components of these types of cases, specifically Cristina's. And so, of course, you were released from custody. You spoke about that last week, Cristina. And then at some point, you made a decision that you wanted to take legal action against the police department. And will you share with us what happened then?
Yeah, sure. So I actually was never in custody because I had to go to the emergency room. So I was never in the custody of the cops. But I just went straight to the emergency room because I was really burnt up. So, back to finding representation. So I actually, I'm healing from all these 3-degree burns. I had to get skin graft surgery. And obviously need to get a lawyer because I have over 100,000 in medical bills. Not only was I brutalized, but I also have all these bills from being, 3-degree burns. This is heavy surgery. They have to cut your skin and put it on your other side of your leg. So it's not like I just got bruised. It's like this is permanent burns. So I just put a post on Facebook, and this is how I found my first lawyer. And I just had friends that I went to high school with, and they are in LA. And I went with mutual friends of students, and they, and my first lawyer, LA Bluth, we talked, and he was able to take the case. A lot, I think, is, because it did involve Palm Security as well, because the Palm Security actually also held me on the ground as well. So it wasn't just the police. It was also, I was in the custody of security as well. So I had two people responsible for my injuries, two parties. And then from there, I had Cal Potter, who passed away, unfortunately. Elliot Bluth, he wanted to get Cal involved because Cal was known to fight for against Metro when many lawyers just don't. So he already knew that, being a lawyer, that Cal was the person to go to. So I was very lucky because I was able to find my first set of lawyers because of mutual friends who I went to high school with. Otherwise, and also it was interesting because my current lawyer, he practices law in both LA and Las Vegas. So Las Vegas was, nobody would even write back or anything because, Las Vegas, even my friends who are from Las Vegas, they already said, don't tell Cristina, but she doesn't have a chance against Metro. They already were very, they already knew, people in Las Vegas already know better. So my lawyer's from LA and Las Vegas, so he practiced law both. Anyway, so Cal Potter, he's actually was a very well respected lawyer, and people who were in the law community already knew he was gonna fight. Unfortunately, he passed away. With my lawsuit, it went to all the Ninth Circuit, and they killed it at Ninth Circuit, and they actually brought it to San Diego, because they thought, okay, well, let's bring it to California because maybe I would have a better fight in California. But unfortunately, they were comparing my burns to cases in California. They're talking about things in San Diego that happened. And you're like, okay, wait a second. The temperatures in Las Vegas are nowhere compared to San Diego. So it was really hard to even, I mean, you can watch my trial. It's all open to the public. If you search it, you can actually listen to the argument, but that was hilarious. Like them fighting, and you're just like, are you serious? You're comparing this. I don't know. It was just kind of ridiculous. So anyway, they killed it with immunity. They didn't even ask if the force was reasonable or not. So we didn't even get to our constitutional rights where the fourth asked if force is reasonable or not. So they just gave it a free pass, basically. So the cops got a free pass at this. And then I was really disappointed because I was waiting. By then, I was probably waiting, how many years? Maybe like, I'm going to guess like 4 years, maybe 5 years to even get to that point. So we're thinking like, okay, this is a 9 year, almost 9 years now, 8-year process. So by like 5 years, you're like halfway, you're like, oh, you're going to kill an immunity. And then I'm still like trying to like figure out how I'm going to pay my bills. And I also have PTSD, which we talked about with burn survivors. What happens is you're in trauma. So a lot of it, you go through a lot of delusional states in extreme pain situations. So it triggered from PTSD. So I've been going in and out of the hospital this whole time while keeping a job. So I had a lot of angst by then. So I'm just like, oh, really? So I've been waiting 5 years and then you're going to kill it in immunity. So my lawyer already just kind of was sitting with it, and they're like, okay, I'm really sorry for, about what the outcome, but I really don't think anyone's going to reopen your case. Like my lawyer kind of told me, honestly, like he didn't think no one's going to take it. Even if I try to find someone to appeal the verdict, he didn't think anyone would take it. So from there, I was like, okay, my parents were telling me let it go too. So everyone around me is like, no. So I was like, well, I'm going to go get free legal advice, right? So from there, I went to free legal aid, which everyone is entitled to go. It's located on Charleston. And then I go in there and I'm like, I just say Metro, and they're like, go away. Like they already knew, like you say Metro, they're going to just push you away. You can't even get to any other information. Cause I kept asking him like, okay, where do I go now? Where do I go now? And I didn't. And then my friend Michelle, who you guys talked to before, you guys know my friend Michelle from My Scars Are Beautiful. She's like, okay, well, you go to the bar next and go on this website. So I did so I went to the legal bar, I think, or the other building that's on Charleston, and they couldn't give me any answers. And then I went to another law firm that's located on, I think, 6th Street. So I just went on a walk to law, like all the places to go, and everyone turned me away. And then I went on the website where you're able to contact lawyers. And then from there, one person actually called me back because I would leave messages, and she was like really rude. And she's like, don't you know who I am? I represent the police. Why would you even contact me? And first off, if you go on those websites that are free to the public to find law advice, they don't gonna say they represent the police. So I don't know how she think I would know this. I'm just kind of just going through cold calling, trying to find a lawyer. So they were all turned down. No one answered me. I later wrote to my current lawyer again, and I'm like, I really want to reopen this. Do you know anybody who would possibly take it? And he's like, okay, well, yeah. So he gave me a law firm. And he's like, I don't really think they're going to take it, Christine. They're not going to take it. And I'm like, okay. And then I talked to Abe, and he said, and he called me back, and I talked to him like person to person, real, just who I am, like this is what happened, like a person, and he's like, oh, okay, and he looked into my case, and the immunity clause was what interested him. And that's why he took it. And he also said that I convinced him. So he's like, oh, you also convinced me. So I just thought, oh, that's nice. Maybe he felt like, oh, this poor girl, like she's got all these medical bills, and like the burns are, like Cal Potter said, these are the worst burns he saw in Las Vegas. So, so from there, Abe, which I'm still trying to get hold of, he was able to open not all my claims, because I had several different battery charges, neglect, a lot of these, charges against Metro. He was able to open like a lot of the arguments. And also I forgot to mention, so what happened in the first time with the immunity clause, because I also have, you have to also understand, I also had a claim against Palms security because the Palm security guard also held me down. What happened there was because Metro had immunity, they said, we're killing your Palms argument too. So they killed everything just with one stone. You know what I mean? With immunity. So I didn't even get to even talk about Palm's responsibility because it was on their property. So with that, so from where I am today, I still probably need to update it, but I can figure out how many of my claims against Metro is. But again, finding a lawyer in Las Vegas, you just like, you have to understand, like, I really lucked out because I had a lot of range of like school friends and with advice, but I don't know if you don't have any contact with a lawyer, I don't think you would get very far. And you also have to understand too, I have legal like the responsibility was also in the hands of the Palms, because the Palms could have stopped it all then. You know what I mean? It was on their property. They could have been like, okay, well, there's a shady tree right here with a lot of lawn. That's a perfect place to hold someone down. So there's chances of that to not occur for my case, but I don't think, if I didn't have all that on my side, I don't think I would get as far as I got, because I got farther than where most people, and you guys have talked about before, like I got a little farther just because I think because of the Palms responsibility also to my injuries, not just police.
Nisa, of course, with these types of cases, we have typically it's difficult to get attorneys to represent people who come, I would imagine, come to you from a perspective of legislation that could change this, that could make it easier for people who are victims of police misconduct. What are some of the things that we as citizens can do to contribute? Can you explain some of the legislation behind the things that Cristina was talking about?
Absolutely. Thank you, Guy. And thank you, Cristina, for sharing. I think one of the main things to understand is that the officer that violated Cristina's civil and human rights was let off based off of qualified immunity, which is basically a legislation that allows officers to be immune to prosecution when they have, utilized excessive force against a civilian. This has been in law. I'm not sure about Nevada, but it's been federal law, a part of federal law since the mid 1800s. And with all the unrest that was happening in the South around the emancipation and movement with Black and brown people, indigenous people, and the KKK, there was a lot of unrest in the South. And so that's how that came about. It was to protect government officials from prosecution. And then, of course, the clause basically states that it is upon the plaintiff, the person that is suing, that is pursuing the civil suit, to prove that the government official violated their constitutional rights, which, it's tricky because as we've seen in the past, historically, police officers are completely, almost 100% immune to prosecution. So in regards to legislation in Nevada, we saw a special session happen this summer in the Nevada State Legislature. They wanted to address, obviously, the budget because of COVID, but they also wanted to address racial injustice. And, a lot of people have asked me, well, is this progress? Are we reforming police in Nevada? And, all I can say is that it's a start, but we have a long way to go in regards to passing effective legislation that will actually allow for police to be held accountable. So SB 2 was passed. It was an amendment to NRS 289, actually SB 242, which is an amendment to NRS 289. NRS 289 is the Nevada Peace Officer Bill of Rights. This piece of legislation is the legislation that all Nevadans who care about public safety, who care about civil rights, who care about human rights needs to look into, to break down, to basically dismantle this piece of legislation, because qualified immunity is written into this legislation. This is the reason why Cristina has not received justice in any way, shape, or form. This is another case just recently I found out, the case of Junior David Lopez, who was murdered in cold blood on April 6, 2018 during a traffic stop. I just recently found out from their lawyers, the family's lawyer, that the civil suit was thrown out due to qualified immunity. So, time and time again, we see this happen. And with the piece of legislation, NRS 289, we literally have to break it down bit by bit and transform, either completely do away with it or transform it, because there's no way for us to hold police accountable in the state as long as they have that piece of legislation in place. It basically allows for police to police themselves. And as you see in Cristina's case, it's so difficult to find representation. We have a number of individuals in our local impacted group, Families United for Justice Las Vegas, who is looking for representation right now at this very moment, calling law firms every day, not able to find any leads. In fact, getting a lot of pushback from lawyers who are really focused on making money and not really invested in justice in the state. There's so many systemic issues. Representation is one of them, but the law is definitely, I would say, the largest mountain that we're facing.
And you guys also know there's a cap, right? So like everyone thinks this is about money, and it's really not money, because the cap is like, I think it's, I'm not quite sure. I think it's like 50,000 you can actually sue Metro. So my bills are over 100,000, 100,000 and more. So like, obviously, even if I get to the point where I can actually get to a win, I actually still going to have to claim bankruptcy. This is more like this needs to change, because like, oh yeah, the taxpayers don't want to pay for all the neglect that's going on, but it's not even where they can get to point one, you know what I mean? To even have accountability. And that's another reason probably why lawyers won't take your case, is they're not going to see a win in that too, because
that's right.
You're like, okay, I'm like off the rec, or maybe, I don't know, but I've heard stories that lawyers do get, pushed, like harassed by cops, if they do take people's cases. So I mean, there's not much incentive for a lawyer to even like take your case, just because of that cap, and that was probably approved. That was the voters voted for a cap because they were tired of paying taxpayers money to pay for all these brutalities and killings and all the things that were going on. So that was passed probably. Probably a couple, maybe like, I think it was pretty recently that was in the bill, wasn't it? The cap.
I'm not sure.
Maybe like 20 years ago, or less than 20 years ago, I think. So I mean, that's another reason why you can't find a lawyer, because they're it's just, I mean, there's so much immunity that you can't get to step one. I'm very lucky because I have a big network of friends from going to art schools and things like that. Being an artist in the community, I just know a lot of people because I'm an artist. So a lot of people, you meet a lot of people being an artist, but yeah, it's really, really sad and devastating that these families, how they go on with no justice and not even getting to step one. That's like, it's so sad. And yeah, a lot of things have to change. And I don't know. I definitely think people need to be aware of that bill, the AB.
I do want to add that, because of the killing of George Floyd, it really has created an opening in every American city in regards to what can we do to end police violence, right? We're now at a stage where civilians, regular everyday civilians, are starting to ask that question. beyond the protest, what can I do? What can I, how can I help? How can I support? How can I make changes in my own city, in my own state? I'm going to say that number one, we have to fight police violence locally. Not that fighting federally isn't a thing, it is, but it's a huge effort. It's a huge coalition effort to bring all these people together for a national effort. So I'm not saying that that shouldn't be an investment, but number one, your local community and understanding the plight of local cases and locally impacted people, police brutality survivors and impacted families, is really the place that we must start. So, for example, NRS 289, this is something that we're working on with Nevada Attorneys for Criminal Justice. It's basically a progressive organization of public defenders and attorneys who care about criminal justice reform and transforming the system to be more just and fair for everyone. And they've been working on a legislation to propose, a bill to propose, which is called the Bad Apple Accountability Act. And basically what this group has done, this group of attorneys have done, is they've gone through NRS 289 point by point, every single detail of NRS 289, and they've written the correction of what it should be in order for us to actually be able to hold police accountable when they, commit these egregious acts on civilians. So this is something that's in the works. Guy, you asked earlier, what can the average person do? I would say it needs to be about that conversation. It needs to be about education. We need to, for myself, who I am a community organizer and activist, working with the frontline community, it's upon myself, right, to try to titrate this information and distribute it and get people to be engaged, to understand what it is that we're all facing in the state of Nevada, right? And so there's a lot of programming. Obviously, we collaborate on this show. We have a lot of other programs like tomorrow. So tomorrow is October 22nd, the National Day of Protest to Stop Police Brutality, Repression, and the Criminalization of a Generation. It's the 25th year of this national day. The October 22nd Coalition has been moving the community to awareness for the last 20 plus years to get people to understand that police violence is an epidemic. It is something that happens frequently. It's not something that, it's an anomaly and that we hear about once in a while. Actually, what is an anomaly is holding police accountable with a 99.7, 99.8% justifiable homicide rate. In other words, pretty much all police homicides, except for that 0.2, 0.3% are of all police homicides are considered justified by the state, meaning that only those 0.2, 0.3% are actual prosecutions and convictions of officers, right? So literally, like out of 1,000 cases, you might have like, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 convictions out of those cases, right? I mean, it's just a crazy display of the ultimate power that the state has against the people that live in these lands. And so, again, I'm talking about the event tomorrow. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. I got too passionate. October 22nd is tomorrow. So tomorrow we have a special online event. We have 12 of our directly impacted people, family members, and police brutalities survivors, such as Cristina. She will be on the panel as well tomorrow on our live streamed on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Forced Trajectory Project. We will be live streaming from 6 to 8 p.m. And basically, the impacted community is going to share with the Nevada community what it is that they've been going through ever since their loved one was killed or they themselves were brutalized. And it's really upon the information, the knowledge, the wisdom, the experience that those directly impacted have is what's going to educate the community about what we need to do to move forward to support not only their own struggle for justice, because when they get justice for themselves, they actually get justice for all Nevadans, because that case in particular can be a precedent for future cases, right? And so that's how we achieve justice together. The other way we achieve justice is to support impacted people in their coalition efforts with other organizations such as the Nevada Attorneys for Criminal Justice. I don't know what's going on out there, why there's an echo. Achieve justice through coalition building, right? Through working with large organizations, grassroots organizations like ours. We're working with the ACLU. We're working with Mass Liberation Project, Nevada Attorneys for Criminal Justice, to look at legislation and propose with our elected officials, right? Those that are going to be in office and writing our laws for the state, so that we can continue to push legislation that will actually be effective in holding police accountable. And I will say one last time that the only way we're really going to get any kind of justice in this state is if we dismantle the Nevada Peace Officer Bill of Rights completely. That would literally pull the rug from under their operations, because as long as the police themselves, we're never going to see justice. We're never going to see transparency and accountability. And that piece of legislation is what's holding all of us back from being able to achieve justice and accountability.
I think it's really important, Nisa, for the people to hear that there are others that are out there fighting for their rights. And when you were talking a few minutes ago, Cristina was talking about all the difficulties that she went through trying to get an attorney. And then you also understand that most of the politicians are not necessarily going to be supporting your efforts as well. And it can seem like a completely uphill battle. And I think that when people become enraged and just reach their limits with this type of situation, it's one of the reasons why we want to share these stories and another perspective. Again, I talk about this on almost every show that we do here at Voices of Humanity. But it's because of these are truly the voices that aren't heard. And for so many people, the reason why things become so combustible and eventually explode and people go out and protest is because they feel helpless and they see no accountability whatsoever on the side of the government, which is represented here by the police. And so what you're sharing here about there being people at the grassroots level, so much change in our world and our society has come as a result of the types of efforts that you're talking about today, where literally everybody thinks you're crazy. As Cristina had said, no one's going to take on your case. You're just a grassroots organization. You're never going to change anything. All of the change that's ever happened in this country was born out of very similar efforts to what you and many people who are working with you, Nisa, are engaged in, including Cristina being someone who was actually a victim of the brutality.
That's exactly right. We're in this society of white supremacy and scarcity. It's difficult to get people to not be moved by money, right? The intention has to be rooted in the absolute understanding that we need to push forward in a society that's really about civil and human rights. Whereas we're human beings, every human being that's rights are violated by the police is a very, very small number of families that get justice. And even still, those conviction rates, the 2.2, 0.3%, it would even be questionable to say that those cases actually receive justice, because if you look at these cases, like the case of Oscar Grant, which miraculously is being reopened to prosecute another police officer that was involved in his death. It's happening right now. It's a historic moment. That officer that was convicted only received 11 months in prison, which is like, he took somebody's life, right? 11 months in prison. There are people that are serving sentences for marijuana that are longer than 11 months, right? So it's just, there is no justice in this system. And so that's why it's so important for people on ground who are passionate, who care about human lives, who care about human rights, to be involved in this dialogue, and not so much to be, let's say, reactive, right? We can't be reactive in this movement. We have to be responsive. We've been fighting police violence for hundreds of years in these lands. We've been fighting genocide. We've been fighting colonialism for hundreds of years. We can't afford to be reactive. The state of white supremacy is organized, they're calculate, they're intentional. We need to pick that up as well. We need to think and be more organized and more strategic and work and basically build large coalitions. That's what Martin Luther King Jr. said, Dr. Martin Luther King. He said, we have to build uncomfortably large coalitions. And I really think that, we have the knowledge, we have ancestors and past movements to look back at, written down in black and white for us to study, speeches that we can access through YouTube that are historic. It's just, we really we're sitting upon a wealth of knowledge, and we need to source all of that to really come up with a strategy to destroy white supremacy in this society.
One more time, Lisa, will you give us information about your event tomorrow?
Absolutely. So tomorrow at 6 p.m., from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Pacific Coast time, we will be live streaming. You can also sign up through to our Zoom webinar. But of course, we will be live streaming on Facebook, Force Trajectories Project Facebook page. And we will be featuring 12 directly impacted people, family members, and police brutality survivors. Cristina will also be there. Please join us. Get ready for some deep listening. Record the conversation if you have to. If you miss it, it's live streamed on our Facebook, so it will be saved on our Facebook page. And later we will also put it up on our website. So important for those in Nevada who are invested in changing the police landscape in Nevada to listen to those directly impacted, listen to those closest to the issue.
And thank you again, Cristina, for stopping by, and we wish you nothing but success in your quest for justice. And for all of you out there, stay tuned for more broadcasts here at prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media, specifically the Voices of Humanity show, in which we bring people very similar to Cristina and create a platform for them to be able to tell their stories about their interactions with the police. Stay tuned for more of our interviews, and take care of yourselves, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.